Good morning. We will call the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of Wednesday, January 14th, 2026 to order. Let the record show we are missing one commissioner, Mr. Rothstein. The first item this morning would be our opening ceremonies, Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. Item one this morning is our order of business. Mr. Solacek, is there any changes to our order of business?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. There's no change to the order of business.
Okay, commissioners, I would look for a motion to approve the order of business.
So move.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Item two this morning is the minutes of our previous session, which was the December 10th, 2025. Is there any corrections to or additions to those minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move to approve as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. We will move on to, let's see here. Excuse me. We will move on to our first item this morning on the regular agenda. This is a preliminary major plat, PLP-001-2026. This is to consider a preliminary major subdivision plat for the Energy Center 6th Edition subdivision, being a replat of lots 1, 1A, and 2 of Block 1 of the Energy Center 3rd Edition subdivision located in the southeast quarter of Section 1, Township 139 North, Range 96 West in the city of Dickinson. The site is zoned general industrial and public, and the site consists of approximately 70.71 acres. Ms. Burchett, good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Natalie Burchak, City Planner. So the applicant is requesting approval of the Energy Center 6th Edition preliminary major subdivision, being a replat of lots 1, 1A, and 2 of Block 1 of the Energy Center 3rd Edition subdivision, located in the southeast quarter of Section 1, Township 139 North, Range 96 West, within the city of Dickinson. So the site is zoned general industrial or GI and public or P. The site consists of approximately 70.71 acres. So the purpose of this subdivision is to further divide those lots, particularly lot 1 to the south, in order to sell off parcels of that lot to future developers, as well as to divide the north portion, particularly to aid the city in preparing for the readiness center that we've requested grant money for multiple times in the past. So Energy Center 6th Edition was previously proposed and approved by City Commission in June of 2024. However, it was never actually recorded at the Stark County Courthouse, so it was never officially recorded, and that year deadline has passed. So the applicant had to come back through this process in order to get an alternate version of that plat approved. As of now, staff has received no public comments regarding this application. I'm present and the applicant is present to answer any questions that you guys may have, and staff would recommend approval of this preliminary major subdivision contingent on the approval of REZ-001-2026 and the associated development agreement.
All right, thank you, Ms. Burchak. Any questions for staff regarding this plat application? . 。 does the applicant have any comments they'd like to make regarding this?
Morning, Commissioners. Andrew Schrank with Highlands Engineering, representing the applicant Dickinson Energy Park for this preliminary plat application. Just to add a little bit more information to the plat that we're proposing here, lots 1, 2, and 7 on this plat are actually City of Dickinson lots, so those would be turned over and owned by the City of Dickinson. The city owns the majority of those lots currently, but part of this plat and part of the previous plat was trying to provide access to the northwest portion of this property that the city owns. So in discussions with the city, instead of the previously proposed public right-of-way that would have come through this site, we proposed just giving the city 50 feet of property, and they can build their own private access road to access the south side of the National Guard Armory, as well as the northwest corner where they have a public safety training facility that may be planned for that area. So there would no longer be any public rights of way or new streets or anything with this plat that were part of the previous plat that came forward 2 years ago. They would all just be private city roads to access that northwest property. Lot 7 in the southwest corner is actually an existing city lift station. The city had indicated they may need to expand that lift station at some point in the future. So that's another area where there are some land swaps between the city and Dickinson Energy Park to allow for a little bit more area to expand that lift station in the southwest corner. You'll notice there's kind of a dashed line that runs through this site. That's the current ownership line between, it's the green line shown on the screen. Our platted lines don't necessarily match that line, so those areas are some land swaps between Dickinson Energy Park and the city of Dickinson to allow for the things that I'm indicating here. So when we get to the zone change, which is the next item, it'll make a little more sense of why there's such odd areas of zone changes. Those are the land swaps that are happening between the city and Dickinson Energy Park to match these platted lot lines. A couple other things to note. On the south side, we are dedicating additional right-of-way along East Villard Street. The main reason for that is for sanitary sewer. Sanitary sewer is going to come between lots 4 and 5 through the easement that we're showing through tract 1 and along the north side of East Villard Street. So we're dedicating additional right-of-way to put that sewer in the city's public right-of-way rather than an easement along that south line. That'll also allow future roadway expansions and things, a little more room for East Villard Street. There is a fairly large, maybe a half acre or so right-of-way dedication at the corner of East Villard Street and Energy Drive. The city indicated they may someday put a roundabout at that corner. There's also some easements and things, so that was a fairly unusable corner for this owner. So we've dedicated sufficient right-of-way for what may be a future roundabout at that corner. Tract 1 would be reserved for a stormwater management facility and the sanitary sewer that would serve this site. That would be a detention pond that would serve lots 3, 4, and 5. So those lots naturally drain down towards Tract 1. So we'd put in a regional detention pond. The owner would construct that. That would get turned over to the city once it's built and approved. And that would be a regional pond for those lots. And with that, I guess if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to address those.
All right, thank you, Mr. Schrank. Any questions for the applicant? All right, seeing none, I thank you. Everybody's had a chance to review the staff report and the development agreement. Is there any questions or concerns regarding that? All right, if not, then we can open the public hearing regarding this preliminary major plat application. If there's anyone in the public that has any comments or concerns regarding this application, you can come forward to the podium or you can call into 701-456-7006. Once again, anyone in the public have any comments or concerns regarding this plat application? Seeing and hearing none, we will close the public hearing. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of PLP 001-2026, the Energy Center 6th Edition preliminary major subdivision as being consistent with the City of Dickinson Comprehensive Plan, as being compliant with the City of Dickinson zoning ordinance, and as being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We will move into the next item this morning, item B. This is a rezoning request, REZ-001-2026. This is to consider a zoning map amendment from general industrial GI to public P for Lot 1, Block 1 of the Energy Center 6th Edition subdivision, a zoning map amendment from general industrial GI to public for Lot 7 of Block 1 of the Energy Center 6th Edition subdivision, and a zoning map amendment from public P and general industrial GI to general industrial GI for Lot 5 and 6 of Block 1 of the Energy Center 6th Edition, located in the southeast quarter of Section 1, Township 139 North, Range 96 West, in the city of Dickinson. This site consists of approximately 31.9 acres. Ms. Burchak.
Thank you, Commissioners. Natalie Burchak, City Planner. So the applicant is requesting approval of a zoning map amendment from general industrial and public to public for Lot 1 of Block 1 of the Energy Center 6th Edition subdivision, a zoning map amendment from general industrial to public for Lot 7 of Block 1 of the Energy Center 6th subdivision, and a zoning map amendment from general industrial and public to general industrial for Lot 5 and 6 of Block 1 of the Energy Center 6th Edition, located within the city of Dickinson. So the sites consist of approximately 31.98 acres. The purpose of this rezoning request is to align better with the previously proposed preliminary major subdivision in order to better delineate the property between what's owned by the city and what's owned by the developer. So everything getting rezoned to public would be owned by the city after a land swap is conducted through the development agreement associated with the plat and this rezone. I would just leave basically those north 2 lots, and then the lot to the southwest would be zoned as public, whereas the remaining lots would be zoned as general industrial. And then this rezone just makes sure that all of those lots are completely within one zoning district in order to make sure that that proposed plat fits within the City of Dickinson's municipal code. As of now, staff has not received any public comments regarding this rezone application. I and the applicant's representative are here to answer any questions you may have, and staff would recommend approval of this rezoning request contingent on the approval of PLP-001-2025 and the recording of the Energy Center 6th Edition subdivision and the associated development agreement.
All right, thank you, Ms. Burchak. Any questions for staff? It's obviously follows the first item we just went over. All right, no questions for staff? Nothing from the developer? Okay. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, so if there's no questions, we can open the public hearing regarding this rezone request. If there's anybody in the public that has any comments or concerns regarding this rezoning request, REZ-001-2026, please come forward. Or again, you can call into 701-456-7006. Once again, anyone in the public have any comments or concerns regarding this rezone request? Seeing and hearing none, we will close the public hearing. Commissioners, if there's anything else, or otherwise I'd look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of REZ-001-2026, the Energy Center 6 rezoning request as being consistent with the City of Dickinson Comprehensive Plan, as being compliant with the City of Dickinson zoning ordinance, and as being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move into item C this morning. This is a zoning text amendment, ZTA-001-2026, to consider a zoning text amendment to section 62-592, off-street parking design standards of the zoning chapter of the City of Dickinson Municipal Code regarding to industrial off-street parking and traffic circulation area regulations and requirements. Ms. Burchak.
Thank you, Commissioners. Natalie Burchak, City Planner. So Community Development Staff is requesting approval of a zoning text amendment to Section 62-592, off-street parking design standards in Chapter 62 zoning of the Dickinson Municipal Code in order to prevent scoria and dirt from being considered as finished surfacing within city limits, and to add a requirement for a 50-foot minimum paved area from the right-of-way to any unpaved parking areas. So the intention of this amendment is to limit dust generation, track out, and erosion from the industrial parking areas, and to prevent maintenance issues from tracking debris into the rights-of-way and any stormwater drains.
Okay.
Would help if my clicker was on. So, as mentioned previously, the code change that we are proposing is for item 4 in section B of section 62-592 off-street parking design standards, which adds crushed scoria, dirt, and other high debris generating materials may not be used as finished surfacing within the city limits. And then adding item A for those areas where an access drive from a paved public right-of-way enters a loading or storage area that is not paved, a paved entrance of at least 50 feet measured from the right-of-way into the property, or such other equivalent means to catch gravel or sediment prior to entering the public right-of-way is required. With that, staff is present to answer any questions that you guys may have. We have not received any public comments regarding this proposed zoning text amendment, and staff would recommend approval.
All right, thank you, Ms. Burchak. I think we had a work session on this not long ago, just to try to clean up some of these areas, so.
And just a reminder, is this going to grandfather people in that don't meet this requirement, or are they?
Yeah,
gonna be
so it
forced
works
to- okay.
the same as any other zoning text amendment where anything that's out of compliance right now is considered legally non-conforming because it existed prior to this amendment. But if they ever come in for a building permit in the future, then they would have to be brought up to compliance.
All right, any other questions for staff regarding this? All right, if not, then we will open the public hearing. Anybody in the public have any comments or concerns regarding this zoning text amendment, off-street parking design standards? Please come forward, state your name, and give us your concerns. Once again, anyone in the public have any comments regarding this zoning text amendment? Hearing none, we will close the public hearing. Commissioners?
I'll make the motion. I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of ZTA-001-2026, the Industrial Off-Street Parking Standards Zoning Text Amendment, as being consistent with the City of Dickinson Comprehensive Plan, as being compliant with the City of Dickinson zoning ordinance, and as being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. We'll
Thank
move
you.
into item D this morning. This is another zoning text amendment, ZTA-002-2026. This is to consider a zoning text amendment to section 62-133, commercial use types, table 62-162-2, table of permitted uses by zoning district in section 62-162, development regulations, section 62-469, commercial uses, and section 62-469, commercial uses of the zoning ordinance regarding the permitting and licensing of short-term rental uses. Ms. Burchett.
Thank you, Commissioners. So Community Development Staff is requesting approval of zoning text amendments to Section 62-133, Commercial Use Types, Table 62-162-2, Permitted Uses by Zoning Districts in Section 62-162, Development Regulations, and Section 62-469, Commercial Uses in Chapter 62-zoning of the Dickinson Municipal Code. The purpose of this zoning text amendment is to permit and license short-term rental uses in the rural residential or RR, low-density residential or R1, medium-density residential or R2, high-density residential or R3, mobile home or MH, and downtown commercial or DC zoning districts. So the proposed amendment also establishes a licensing process for short-term rentals uses in resident-owned homes that are residential in appearance. So the first change, we are adding item 35 into section 62-133, commercial use types. This defines short-term rentals as a commercial use type and defines them as a residential unit where sleeping accommodations are furnished to transient guests for a charge. This definition only applies to single structures with 5 or fewer guest rooms, 10 or fewer total applicants, and where guests stay for fewer than 28 days. So this ensures that the definition of short-term rental does not overlap with the lodging use, which is typically what bed and breakfasts or hotels would fall under. So we are also requesting the addition of the short-term rentals use into the table 62-162-2, permitted uses by zoning. And as shown, it would be permitted in every residential zoning district as well as in downtown commercial where we've got residences located. And then the additional regulations would be identified in section 62-469 in item 8. And so section 62-469, commercial uses, we would be proposing item 8, short-term rentals, when permitted in the RR, R1, R2, R3, mobile home, and DC zoning districts, short-term rentals shall be subject to the following additional requirements. So item A, short-term rentals must obtain a license through the Community Development Department. In order to obtain a short-term rental license, the applicant shall provide the following information. 1, a list of house rules that all guests must abide by while staying on the property. These house rules shall include a maximum number of guests, not to exceed maximum occupancy rates, as determined by city building and fire codes. 2, a copy of the property deed in which the applicant shall be listed as the deed holder. 3, the information for a primary contact who shall be available 24/7 if any issues arise with the rental property. 4, a list of any other short-term rental uses and licenses the applicant has financial stake in. 5, a list of any other residents or entities that have direct financial stake in the proposed short-term rental, as well as the names of the primary stakeholders for any businesses or corporations with financial stake in the property. 6, an emergency plan that demonstrates to guests how to respond to emergencies such as a fire, as well as signed statement that there are adequate smoke and carbon monoxide detectors installed in the structure. And 7, any additional documentation deemed necessary by community development staff. Item B, all short-term rental licenses are subject to a calendar yearly renewal. A yearly license fee as determined by the city shall be paid at the time of the application submittal. This has been proposed to be $100 annually, which would be included in the fee schedule by the city. It would not be included in this amendment. C, any entity is allowed to apply for or have financial stake in a maximum of 2 short-term rental licenses. D, the short-term rental use is only permitted in residential homes owned by the licensed applicant. The use is not permitted within apartment complexes, duplexes, accessory structures, or ADUs. Any residences utilized as short-term rental shall be residential in appearance. E, the property must meet current zoning requirements, including proper setbacks, landscaping, and off-street parking requirements. F, the revocation or denial of short-term rental license can be performed at the discretion of the community development director or designees. If an applicant wishes to contest a revocation, they shall submit a written request to the community development director or designee to be brought forward for a public hearing in front of City Commission regarding overturning the revocation or denial. The City Commission may overturn a license denial or revocation with a simple majority vote. G, in the event that a license is revoked due to the applicant violating one of the rules outlined above, the applicant may not apply for a new license until at least 6 calendar months have passed. An applicant having had multiple license revocations in the past may serve as justification to deny a new license application. As of now, staff has not received any public comments regarding this proposed zoning text amendment. I'm present to answer any questions you guys may have, and staff would recommend approval.
And this would obviously be retroactive to any of these short-term rentals that are out there, so going forward, we'd be notifying them somehow if we know about them.
Yeah, so we would most likely look into whether or not there are any operating within the city and trying to send them an email to follow this licensing path.
And what would is there a fine if they do not register their short-term rental and are operating that way? How would we address those people?
At least going forward, there was no proposal of a fine. I'm not sure whether or not the city would have the authority to really assign one separately, but our main goal would just be to get everybody into compliance as soon as possible, so at least within the first year of this being active.
Well, I would say that that would be something, hopefully people would be willing to work with us, and normally I think we find ways to communicate effectively and get, obtain compliance. I guess if additional action is required, we'd have to have conversations with the city attorney as for penalties or other related legal action, so.
Commissioners, I would envision that as we get into this, because this is something we've never done before, that Mr. Skolachik is right, that hopefully we would get compliance, but if we find ourselves in a situation where that's becoming problematic, or we have repeat violators of some nature, we may have to look at additional penalties that are provided for in code. Those could be criminal penalties, those could be additional fines. So I think that we're going to probably run this on a case-by-case basis until we get a little bit more information as to how this is going to work. But I envision that this could evolve depending on the circumstances. And anytime you try something new, I think it's going to be a little bit of trial and error here. So hopefully we get compliance. I think that, you know, most residents are going to be willing to do that. If we don't have that situation, obviously we'll have to strategize internally and see what options are available to us.
I guess I have a little concern with it too, is, I mean, you're gonna get a handful of people that are just gonna say, well, they're not gonna do anything, so, because, I mean, there's nothing in code that,
You know, we have the ability to put, again, additional penalties, whether that be infractions where there are criminal penalties, but it's a max fine. It's not something that we can impose jail time on. I'd be really.
yeah, I don't think we're looking at anything like that.
Yeah, I don't
but
think we
I'm
need to go
just-
to that extent
I mean, the
either.
way it's written though, I mean, if they violate this section of the code, is there something that's gonna kick in another section that might cover?
I guess the question would be is whether the city wants to look at this from a perspective of moving forward, meaning that anything, you know, in addition or anything that's adopted thereafter. I think we'll probably have to have a little bit of a discussion internally as to how retroactive we desire to be with this. Moving forward, obviously, anybody that does any additional or adopts or implements a new short-term rental obviously has to be in compliance. We would hope that everyone that has an existing one would get in compliance. I think at this point, I would probably be leaning toward some sort of penalty, again, maybe to the level of an infraction, but nothing more at this point. Just because, like I said, the higher up we get, I don't know if that necessarily warrants it at this point, but that is an option that would allow us to.
Yeah, what I'm looking at is, I mean, if there's a violation of the property maintenance code or building code, I mean, there's another section that addresses
Oh,
that.
Yes.
So
I
with
mean-
this, I mean, what I'm saying is if they violate this section of code, would that kick it into that section of code?
So, and maybe this is a question for Ms. Stewart, since she's sitting over there, but I would gather that if there is another violation of code, whether that be something related to, you know, buildings or something of that nature, that the code enforcement would be able to go in and deal with that accordingly. And then, of course, we have separate provisions of our code that allow us to address those types of issues. That is potentially applicable.
Well, then my question would be, if they just refuse to get licensed, would that trigger any other part of the code? Would that be a violation of this code that would trigger another part of our code that has the consequences in it?
Not the way that it's currently written, I don't believe. We'd have to put it in this particular section to allow for a certain type of penalty.
Is that something we want to look at now, before we pass this with city commission, and then a year down the road, we're looking at this again because we got an issue?
Yeah, I think that we could look back at some of the other financial penalties that are included in the municipal code. Some of them that seem to ring a bell are something around the mark of like $500, $350, something like that as a financial penalty. we can look at that, try to draw some comparables and add that in as maybe a subsection, after subsection G, or tie it into one of the others if it makes sense.
Yeah, the way it reads now, if I'm not gonna register this, what are you gonna do to me? I mean, you're not gonna fine me, why should I pay $100 if you're gonna do nothing if I don't get in compliance? I'd like to see something that, obviously, that it's beneficial for them to pay the $100 or rather than being fined $500 or whatever it might be for not being in compliance.
Okay, yeah, we can definitely look at adding some kind of penalty fee for operating without a license, particularly in subsection F, since that already addresses sort of the violations. And sorry.
And to Ms. Burchak's point, we can be creative, we can set a penalty, we can do a graduated penalty. We've done that before in some other situations where you have a first offense, a second offense, and then on a third offense, you're looking at revocation. I think there's ways to do that. We've done that with other city licenses, whether that be tobacco licenses, alcohol licenses, things of that nature. So we can look at doing some things like that. I think that initially I'd be more in line with fines as opposed to something more severe. But again, if we find ourselves in a situation where we have repeat non-compliance, we might be back here having a further conversation about adding some additional teeth to the ordinance to be able to address some of this stuff.
I think we all know we've ran into this on property maintenance, as our code was pretty weak in the past about
Yep.
when they didn't come into compliance, we fined them, but it really didn't make them do anything special, so.
Well, we definitely appreciate the feedback, so we'll look at adding some additional language in there and bring it back.
Do we wanna table this then and bring this back next meeting, or what do you guys?
I have a quick question.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
So like, what's the difference between if someone doesn't have a special use permit and they're doing commercial business in their home? I mean, is there a fee
So-
structure for that?
That would be more of a code enforcement issue because it's within the City of Dickinson's zoning code as a special use permit. That kind of has its own separate, whereas this would be considered a license
Okay.
as opposed to a special use permit.
Because I was thinking it's similar, you're using your home for commercial use.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And we have had situations where we have had some of that arise, where we have had to proceed in city court to deal with some of that, and we have issued additional complaints and things of that nature. But that usually comes in the form, again, through code enforcement, notifying my office that we have a situation. Typically, we reach out to that individual and say, you know, you're out of compliance, here's what you need to do, and if they don't, then we proceed accordingly based on what the code allows us to do.
I mean, I think I'd be in favor of something graduated where it's a fine, second offense is maybe a little higher fine, and third offense is maybe a little more serious, but, I mean, just something, I think we should do it now instead of coming back and reinventing the wheel 6 months or a year from now, so.
I guess since the use does require a license in order to operate, would it, as Commissioner Schwab mentioned, would it kind of fall under the same as a special use permit where they're operating a use that's not permitted?
Well, I guess in that situation, I'm thinking off the top of my head, we had a situation where someone was kind of operating I would say like I don't even remember what it was, but it was more like an animal. I can't describe it very well, but I apologize. But in that situation, we considered it a zoning violation of Chapter 62, and we proceeded based on the violation of not having a use permit. So I would say that this is a separate situation because it's a license per se, and that's how we have it identified in code. The other one is specifically defined as a special use, whereas in the code, this one is set as a license, so I see them as two different things.
Because I think we got it in here as permitted, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a separate section where it mentions that it has to follow these requirements, so I was unsure if that meant if it doesn't meet these requirements, then it would no longer be permitted. But if there needs to be an additional penalty added to the language, we can certainly add that.
Yeah, I think we should just at least look at something, maybe, I don't know if any other cities are doing anything, if you won't license your short-term rental, if there's a fine, or, but I think we should look at something before we pass this and move it on to city commission, and then just have to do it again
Okay.
6 months from now, so.
In this proposal, will this applies to the ETZ as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this would also apply to ETZ.
So how come, like, when we do, you know, because sometimes, because I know the next one that's coming up with containers, whatever it is, you know, should it apply to the ETZ or not? You know, is there just like a paragraph or a sentence that needs to be added, or?
So I can take that one. So by statute, we have, in the North Dakota Century Code provides that we have jurisdiction within the ETZ, and that usually relates to zoning issues and/or use issues. So we have to be very specific as to what zoning uses and certain things applies in the ETZ. The city has been very reluctant to extend our other ordinances beyond the use and the zoning that's allowed for under the ETZ. So we have had situations where we've had individuals in the ETZ that are either out of use compliance or they have issues with junk and other things on their property, and the city has the jurisdiction to address the zoning issues with the uses through the ETZ by statute. But beyond that, we are limited in what we are able to actually enforce. That falls back on the county to deal with some of those issues. And we've had some of those issues arise recently where the city has obviously enforced the zoning issues to the extent that it can, and then obviously, you know, what other issues will have to fall to the county.
Thank you.
So then, do we want to table this then, is that would be our best option, and bring this back next meeting? I think, with those changes, so we can review them.
So do you need a motion to table it?
Yes, please.
I'll make a motion to table it.
Second. We have a motion and a second to table this till the next meeting. Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, we will table that one to the next meeting.
All right.
Sure.
Hi.
Come on
My
up.
name is Danielle Maderas, and I'm one of the people that kind of started this process. I am a rule follower, and I also have a small business, and I just want to make sure that I'm doing what a citizen should. It is explicitly required on the Airbnb website. For you to be on their website, you have to be following your city code. So that's just something to keep in mind too, that perhaps if I'm reluctant to get the special permit, that is something you could say will be notifying Airbnb, the website, of your non-compliance, and they probably won't be able to use their platform then, thus as a
Okay.
reaction.
I
So-
think that's fair, but there are certain different requirements for different short-term rental
Yeah.
websites. And then people also doing short-term rentals not through a website.
Yeah.
We're just trying to make sure that we cover all of
For
that
sure,
as well.
I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you.
And
for
we
your feedback.
appreciate your
Yes.
rule follower. I mean, so,
Yes, it's-
there's just a handful of people that, if there's no teeth in the ordinance, they're probably just gonna say, well, I'm gonna take my chances
I
and see what
totally get it.
happens.
I'm also a teacher, so
Yeah.
just like that.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. All right, then we will move on. I think the next item is just public issues of concern not on the agenda. If there's anybody in the public that has anything they'd like to address, they can come up at this time.
Mr. Chairman, we didn't receive any public comments not on the agenda, the sign-up.
Nobody
form.
signed up? Okay, all right, we will move on then. Item 5 is items not on the agenda. This is for commissioners, if there's anything that they would like to bring up at this time. Hearing none, so we can move on. Then we'll move into our work session items. This is, our first item is personal and commercial vehicle definition. Ms. Burchuk.
Thank you, Commissioners. Natalie Burchak, City Planner. So for this work session item, we're looking at discussing the definitions for personal and commercial, as well as recreational and heavy vehicles as found in our zoning ordinance. Some of the questions to consider for this are, how does the city currently define and differentiate between personal, commercial, recreational, and heavy vehicles? Do these definitions match definitions from the North Dakota Century Code? What is the purpose of prohibiting both commercial and heavy vehicles from being parked in residential zoning districts? And how do other communities handle some of these definitions? So the current definitions that the city has within section 62-10 definitions are that commercial vehicles mean trucks, trailer cab units, trailers used in any way as part of any commercial application, endeavor, or business. Heavy recreational vehicles means motor coach homes, converted buses, and converted trucks. Heavy vehicles means vehicles over 10 tons gross empty weight. Personal vehicles shall mean passenger cars, vans, pickup trucks, camper shells, toppers, and other similar appurtenances intended for attachment to a personal vehicle, trailers under 20 feet in length, and boats. And recreational vehicles means a vehicle towed or self-propelled on its own chassis or attached to the chassis of another vehicle and designed or used for temporary dwelling, recreational, or sporting purposes. Recreational vehicles include, but are not limited to, travel trailers, campers, boats, and boat trailers. They are also mentioned in a few other sections. So in section 62-471, accessory uses, this mentions in item 5, no outdoor storage of materials or equipment used in the home occupation shall be permitted other than motor vehicles used by the owner to conduct the occupation. Parking or storage of heavy commercial vehicles to conduct the home occupation is prohibited. So this is just a quick mention of heavy commercial vehicles as opposed to specifying either commercial or heavy vehicles, and these not being allowed in the residential areas that home-based businesses are operating in. And additionally, they mention in section B, item 5 in section 62-594, parking of certain vehicles. Commercial vehicles and heavy vehicles shall not be parked on any lot within the R1, R2, R3, and mobile home districts. This section shall apply even if the commercial vehicle or heavy vehicle is not being driven for the purpose of the commercial application, endeavor, or business at the time said vehicle is parked within the aforementioned zoning districts. So this has led to some confusion in the past of commercial versus heavy vehicle, because you can kind of interpret this as saying that any commercial vehicle, so anything that even has like the logo of a company printed on it that people will drive for work, would constitute a commercial vehicle and therefore cannot be parked in the residential zoning district. It would have to be parked in a garage. This is an interpretation that can be made from this definition that the city doesn't necessarily support, as that's fairly limiting to what can be parked in front of a house after business hours. So the North Dakota Century Code defines commercial motor vehicles, meaning a motor vehicle or combination of motor vehicles designed or used to transport passengers or property. So A, if the gross combination weight rating or gross combination weight is 26,001 pounds or 11,793.86 kilograms or more, whichever is greater, provided the towed unit has a gross vehicle weight rating or gross vehicle weight of more than 10,000 pounds or 4,536 kilograms, whichever is greater. If the vehicle has a gross vehicle weight rating or gross vehicle weight of more than 26,000 pounds or that 11,793.4 kilograms, whichever is greater. If the vehicle is designed to transport 16 or more passengers, including the driver, or if the vehicle is transporting hazardous materials and is required to be placarded in accordance with 49 CFR Part 172, Subpart F, or any quantity of a material listed as a select agent or toxin in 42 CFR Part 73. So it gets pretty complicated when you get into the commercial motor vehicle definition for the Century Code. 71 defines recreational vehicle, meaning any motorcycle not qualified for registration, off-highway vehicle, snowmobile, vessel, or personal watercraft, and the term does not include an electric bicycle. Those are the primary definitions that you find in the Century Code. As you can see, commercial motor vehicle kind of gets lumped in with heavy vehicle in the Century Code. Personal vehicle is just typically considered any vehicle that doesn't meet these definitions. And then heavy recreational is kind of similar to the definition we have currently. So how do other communities define these terms? A majority of communities just have in their zoning ordinance that any reference to any type of vehicle matches what the North Dakota Century Code defines them as opposed to having their own special definition. So we can see in Bismarck, where a term is used in this chapter, the meaning of that term is defined in Title 39 of the North Dakota Century Code, if that term is so defined, and as that title may be amended from time to time, is hereby adopted by reference and incorporated herein. So Bismarck just uses what's in the Century Code and leaves it open so that if that definition is amended at the state level, it'll also be amended in their zoning ordinance. Same thing for Watford City. Words and phrases used in this chapter shall have the meanings and be defined as provided in the North Dakota Century Code in Title 39 and NDCCA Section 390101, and all subsequent amendments shall be and are hereby incorporated by reference in this ordinance. Williston defines them separately. So it defines heavy commercial as a vehicle with a gross vehicle weight greater than 10,000 pounds. Personal vehicles such as boats, RVs, and campers are exempt from this weight limit. An occupation or trade vehicle is a vehicle designed specifically to perform a type of function or service associated with an occupation or trade. So instead of being generally defined as anything used in a commercial operation, it has to be a specialized function or service, not just a generalized vehicle. Vehicle personal, vehicle is owned by an individual and used for commuting purposes. And work vehicle, vehicle owned by a business entity which is used by an affiliated employee for commuting purposes. And Grand Forks goes back to using or just defines a vehicle generally includes every device in or by which any person or property may be transported or drawn upon a public roadway, except devices moved by human power or used exclusively upon railway tracks or rails. The term does not include an electric bike, commercial pedal, car, or electric scooter. Some of the findings that we had. Prohibiting parking of commercial vehicles based on the 62-10 definition can be overly restrictive and does not prevent the parking of heavy commercial vehicles. That's already covered by prohibiting vehicles generally. This is specifically also for the just working into the home-based occupations as well. And many cities do not include a definition for personal and commercial vehicles in the city zoning ordinance. Instead, these terms are defined in their traffic codes and often reflect definitions used by the NDTOT. So some of these suggestions that city staff has come up with are to keep the commercial vehicle definition the same, remove the heavy recreational vehicle definition, as it can sometimes get a little confusing, heavy recreational versus heavy vehicles, defining heavy vehicles as any vehicle over 10,000 pounds, personal vehicle, just cleaning up the definition to say means a passenger car, and then remove that under 20 feet in length requirement for trailers, and then leaving recreational vehicles as is. Removing that commercial within the home-based business occupation definition so that it only blocks heavy vehicles as opposed to commercial vehicles as well. And then removing the commercial vehicle removal from the locations of parking within the zoning ordinance as well. With that, Code Enforcement Officer Tiffany Stewart is also present to answer any questions you guys may have. And we're just looking for feedback as well on some of these proposals.
If we limit heavy vehicles to 10,000, that would eliminate any class 4 higher truck. So an F-450, Ram 5500, those would all be above the 10,000 gross weight.
So in that case, I guess what we were referencing back to was what's ultimately in Century Code.
Century Code is 26,000 pounds would be class 6 or 7 plus.
So, and we could always reference back to what is fundamentally there, but.
I mean, you might have some oil companies, that their guys are driving F-450s or F-550s.
Yeah.
That would be no longer allowed.
Yeah, that's a good comment. We were thinking more so 2,500 and 3,500 classes. The conversation when we had this discussion at the development team wasn't brought up about the 4,500 and 5,500 classes. So that's something we could definitely look at, as well as just.
Yeah, because I think the 26,000 pound requirement starts at class 6 trucks probably, so.
Probably. I'd have to
It's
look at
right
that,
in there.
but-
5,500 is just below class 6, I believe, because you wouldn't need a.
Yeah, so that's something we could look at, making a modification here.
Yeah, so maybe heavy vehicles, we just got to look at that number a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have a lot of these service trucks in the oil field that probably go home with their people are probably a 4,500 or 5,500 probably, so,
A welder, someone like that's gonna be that weight for sure.
yeah.
Well, there was something on the news the other night about DOT redoing the registration on vehicles according to weight, vehicle weight. So
I didn't catch that,
when they renew.
but, yeah, we can take a look at that, do some additional research and come back
I
before we
think,
bring an amendment.
and I think under recreational vehicles, that's gonna cover every motorhome. If it looks like a motorhome, it's a recreational vehicle. I think we can leave that out of the heavy vehicles. I think that's, taking that one out makes sense to me. But I would just look at that heavy vehicle, that 10,000 that would be like a 3,500 or less probably, so. So other than that, I think this is, some good cleanup changes, and it kind of clarifies some of these sections a little bit, but. we definitely don't want class 6 and 7 trucks parked on residential streets, but, I mean, if.
And that was some of what we were shooting for, was cleaning some of those attributes up, as well as, like in the case of the trailer length of 20 feet, if it's parked on private property, how are we supposed to go check that? And there's no physical means of doing that, let alone the fact then how are you measuring that? Because your title might say a certain number, but if you physically go measure end of bumper to end of bumper, that might be a different length, and so then there's going to be a potential argument for that. So all of those things were discussed and
Yeah.
brought up when we were talking about these things. So.
Yeah, I think most of the changes are good. I think we just need to maybe clarify that heavy vehicles and look at some of those class ratings and just, I don't think we want to limit the 45s and 5500s because we're going to see a lot of those at this point now. I mean, like you said, welders, they're all going to be running those heavy trucks, so.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll definitely take a look at that.
Okay. Anything else on that one? Okay, if there's nothing else, I think we can move forward on that then. The next item would be the presentation on residential storage containers.
Thank you, Commissioners. So, goal of this work session item is just to discuss utilizing those kind of metal storage containers that you can sometimes see on lots, trying to prevent those from going in place in residential lots. So some of the questions to consider going into this presentation: does the city want to allow those storage containers to be utilized as accessory structures? So this would be a permanent structure in a residential area. Should they be prohibited only in residential within city limits, or should it be extended into the ETZ? How does the International Building Code, or IBC, define storage containers versus accessory structures? And then how are other communities handling these requirements? So as of right now, the closest that we have to mentioning storage containers, we've got Note 7, which is found on Table 62-162-2, which mentions that all allowable accessory buildings to a residence shall be limited to a maximum of 1,800 and for a maximum of 3 detached structures for the first 1 acre or less. The total area of all accessory buildings may be increased by 70 square feet for each additional 1/10 acre of land area above 1 acre. Accessory buildings shall include the following: barns, stables, storage buildings, and detached personal vehicle garages. So this is the section that actually mentions those accessory structures. Of course, there's a little bit of cleanup that needs to be done for this note. As you see, it mentions accessory buildings instead of accessory structures. There's no mention of what that 1,800 actually is. It should be referenced to square feet, but that needs to be added in there. And then it doesn't mention any of these storage containers that we've seen pop up throughout the city. So the 2024 International Building Code, Section 202, defines an intermodal shipping container as a 6-sided steel unit originally constructed as a general cargo container used for the transport of goods and materials. So this also includes those small steel boxes that, again, can be placed in front of somebody's home when they're moving. It can sometimes be placed on a lot permanently to be used as kind of a storage shed without having to get any kind of building permit on it. Or even if they do have to come through the building permit process, they typically can't be blocked because they could technically fall as a accessory structure. How do other communities handle the concerns with these structures? So Bismarck's current requirement for portable storage containers, other requirements in a non-industrial zoning district. Container usage in any non-industrial zoning district is allowed only as follows. Residential moving. Containers may be used for a period not to exceed 30 days for the purpose of loading or unloading furniture and other household goods associated with residential relocation. Loading and unloading semi-trailers in the process of transferring goods may occupy a site for up to 48 hours for loading and unloading purposes. And parking lot truckload sales, fundraising activities, or similar promotional or charitable events which utilize containers are permitted for a period not to exceed 30 days within any 90-day period. So for the most part, they limit these storage containers to being present on residential lots for a maximum of 30 days, with the exception of unloading and unloading, which is shorter. It's only 48 hours. In Williston, all accessory buildings shall conform to the style or decor of the principal building unless plans for upgrading the principal structure will also occur. No corrugated or sheet metal shall be used for siding of dwelling or the accessory building. No galvalume color shall be used. So this just kind of outright blocks those storage containers, if they're built out of any sheet metal, from being constructed on any residential lots. Findings. So currently, city staff has received numerous complaints and concerns over storage containers located in residential areas. That's what's kind of driving this presentation. They're not considered structures in the International Building Code, or IBC, unless they are significantly renovated to be used as some kind of occupied structure or shed. But this, again, involves pretty significantly altering them, changing some of that steel to actually be a permanent structure. Storage containers may serve commercial purposes, but they are not residential in appearance. So leaving them on residential lots kind of limits what that residential appearance is going to look like. It can sometimes look a little bit more commercial or industrial. So our suggestion is to amend that note 7 in the zoning code to say that all allowable accessory structures to a residence shall be limited to a maximum of 1,800 square feet and for a maximum of 3 detached structures for the first 1 acre or less. The total area of all accessory structures may be increased by 70 square feet for each additional 1/10 acre of land area above 1 acre. Accessory structures shall include the following: barns, stables, storage buildings, and detached personal vehicle garages. Intermodal storage containers, as defined in the International Building Code, are not permitted in the RR, R1, R2, R3 mobile home or downtown commercial zoning districts for a period of greater than 30 days. So this ensures that anybody using these storage containers for the purposes of moving or for any other purpose that's less than 30 days still has the opportunity to use these, as that's still a use that these storage containers find, but they cannot be permanently constructed buildings. They can't be considered as accessory structures. They would have to be removed within 30 days. With that, we are open to any questions or comments that you guys may have.
So, going to the ETZ in this, I think opening up to the ETZ might open a whole can of worms as far as that goes, but,
I think you're gonna find more of these structures in the ETZ, way more than you would in the city limits, so.
Yeah, at least the way that it's written now, anything that falls in the agricultural zoning district would be allowed. They would still be allowed to have those storage containers as any kind of accessory structure, even if it's residential in use. But it would prevent any of those rural residential lots from having these storage containers, as it's considered in our zoning district, and it would be considered a zoning use.
are the complaints coming from in city limits or in the ETZ?
They're primarily within city limits. So we would be open to the discussion of not prohibiting them in the ETZ, but at least for the first draft, we were proposing it in both the ETZ and city limits to prevent them from being used.
So in regards to enforcing it, has there been any discussion in how you guys plan on enforcing it? And
So this would be handled as a code enforcement issue. It
Okay.
would be handled by code enforcement. There's already kind of an outline of how to handle any of those infractions, because it would be a use as it's included in that table as an accessory structure use.
Can you tell me what that
Correct.
process looks
I
like?
can expand on that. And Ms. Burchak is correct. So anytime that we have a zoning use issue, those generally can be infractions or misdemeanors under our code, and then those come to me for enforcement. So in that situation, we can impose fines, we can require the structure to be removed and abated. So we have a lot more flexibility in how we handle those and a lot more teeth to enforcement on those because it's part of the zoning portion, and we already have existing remedies in our code that allow us to deal with that stuff, so.
And kind of going back to Commissioner Haugen referencing ETZ, how does that,
Same premise. So if we
So,
get,
what I'm saying is some of these individuals or people that have lived there, they've had some of these storage units for years, and now we're implementing this, and
I guess the question would be is, again, looking forward and forward thinking is if we're going to say, okay, anything adopted after, we move forward. I think most of the time we deal with these on a complaint basis. And, depending on whether that's in the city or whether that's in the ETZ, I don't think code enforcement has the time to be out, looking for these things. It's just something that comes complaint-based. So obviously, we're going to look at it. We're going to see. The goal, first and foremost, is to bring the property owner into compliance. That's what we want to do before we get to the point where we are starting to file anything with, municipal court and whatnot. But we do have the ability to enforce it should be should it be necessary. So again, looking at it, but hopefully getting individuals into compliance, and maybe there is a possibility, and I don't want to speak out of turn here, but maybe Ms. Burchek or Josh can weigh in. I suppose there's a possibility of always trying to get a variance on something if that's allowable, but sometimes they're not if it's not a permitted use. But again, we're going to look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah. Because like in the ETZ, I mean, you could have 1, 5, 10 acres, I guess if it's on 1 acre, a shipping container takes up, quite a bit of space. But in my neighborhood, I know a few have popped up, and, if this code goes in, there might be a run on shipping containers prior to, but, the bigger the area, I guess less of an issue. But if it does, city limits do expand, then, I can see where that's a problem too.
Yeah. Again, anything that's greater than 10 acres is usually going to fall under the agricultural zoning district, and that would not be, we would not be enforcing this in that district. They would still be allowed in there. But as for the rural residential, again, they're supposed to be residential in nature, so kind of prohibiting them from using any kind of permanent storage containers.
I mean, we need to look at, there's several new subdivisions that popped up, within a stone's throw of the city limits now. You've got Broken X Estates, the Acres, you've got the one Stable Estates. I mean, is this something that, if you lived in that neighborhood, do you want people to stack 2 or 3 storage containers in their backyard?
I think that technically falls under their covenants. Their covenants, usually a lot of those don't allow storage containers, if I'm thinking correctly, on a lot of those rural
You can dress up a
subdivisions.
storage container
You
to
can.
look like a structure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another conversation. They're taking storage containers and turning them into houses, so, I mean, they can be modified to look like a dwelling, so.
Once they're modified pretty significantly, though, then they no longer fall under that century code definition. So once you start removing some of those steel walls and actually bring them up to look like a structure, look like a home, they don't fall under this definition, so then they can't be considered as accessory structures.
So how does that work out in code? Like if I move a shipping container in my yard and all of a sudden make it look like a shed?
Again, it's a majority of it is structurally, so you do have to significantly alter the structure of that shipping container in order to make it an accessory structure. You can't just have it there, place a fake roof over it, and say, "Look, it's a shed now." Like you do have to actually change it pretty significantly. But yeah, because based on the definition, even if minor changes are made, it's still a 6-sided steel box that you would not be permitted to have on the property based on this zoning code.
And to piggyback on Ms. Burchek's comments, some of these newer subdivisions do not have restrictive covenants that don't, some of them do, but some of them don't. So, we can't rely on that wholeheartedly because some of them don't. And so we have to have a remedy available to us to deal with some of this to prevent it from being something more than now we have 17 shipping containers, those types of things.
And in the years I've been here, we've ran into restrictive covenants that the group of homeowners don't establish a homeowners association, so then they don't actually, nobody was willing to call your neighbor and enforce covenants and file lawsuits, and they just let it, and then they look to the city because they're recorded, and the city doesn't actually take care of restrictive covenants either, so.
Yeah, and to reiterate, we do not enforce restrictive
Yeah.
covenants.
Yeah.
So the
So-
city does not have any authority
So the
to do
restrictive
that.
covenants are only as good as the people that live there who are willing to take action on it, so.
But I can also move 3 skid sheds in that are under 10 by 12 too, on that same lot. Technically.
I guess it would depend on whether it falls under the definition or it would meet the parameters of
I mean,
what
you're
we're
like,
discussing.
what the lumberyards sell? a skid
Yeah,
shed?
yeah, I'm
I
just
mean-
saying,
I mean, they
I was
have-
thinking
they
it in
have
that.
roof and siding, and
Yeah.
they're a little different.
They're still residential in appearance as opposed to these that are pretty industrial in appearance.
I mean, how does this affect some of the commercial uses that have these for extra storage now in the city limits? 'Cause
So
I s-
commercial zoning districts and industrial would not be impacted at all. So if it's a commercial property that uses these as some kind of like additional storage for their operations, they are still able to use these. It's only in the residential zoning districts that we're trying to prohibit them from being utilized.
going back a couple slides, the only commercial was the downtown commercial zoning district.
Yeah, which,
Which is a fairly small area right in the downtown area.
and typically I would be surprised
I
if you
don't
can
li-
fit a
I
storage
don't like them
container
on commercial uses either, so that's why I'm,
there. We would be willing to extend it into limited commercial, but community commercial and general commercial, there's enough that would utilize them that I don't think prohibiting them would be worth it. I don't think that's a fight we want to fight.
yeah.
And I don't personally like the look of them either.
No,
I'm just saying, like, if you extend it to the ETZ, I can think of 10 off the top of my head that are probably in the ETZ, you know? And
Within
so
1,000 feet of
yeah,
cities.
yeah. And so that's just it's gonna be a lot of potential running around for code enforcement, so.
I think specific to the discussion around whether or not to include it in the ETZ, this was something in the development team meeting that we had a discussion on, and ultimately we were looking for feedback from the Planning and Zoning Commission. I think that's something we could take back, have a further discussion based on some of the feedback that we've already received, and come back with basically what we recommend, taking all things into consideration.
Mhm.
And I think there's no use for them in city limits personally. I mean, that one's kind of a no-brainer to me as far as in city limits. So,
I mean, I'd be open to saying none in city limits and maybe they're allowed to have one or something,
I would agree to that too.
no more than one. 'Cause
and maybe limit the size, because I think
And
they can
limit
be
the
40
size.
feet.
Yeah, I mean, not a 40-footer, but, you know, or, you know, maybe you put in there anything over 10 foot by 12 foot requires a permit, so we know that what they're putting in. So if they're trying to put a 40-foot container in their backyard, we could probably have some options there. I think I'm open to the RR just because I think we're gonna run into a lot of people that probably have these already, and we don't need to have that fight, but
It could also fit under that legal noncompliance, where if they're already in the RR zoning district, they would be permitted as structures, but then if they try to add any new ones, that would be where it stops. Is kind of how the municipal, where, again, those structures would have existed prior to this code going in, so they can remain, but any new ones being introduced
yeah.
would be
But then
prohibited.
if they need a permit to rebuild their deck, then we're gonna tell them they gotta move this thing out of there.
Fair.
Do we want that fight?
You know, commissioners, I think that, you know, because remind me again, Natalie, what's the threshold for the acreage for the agricultural lot? Is it less than 10?
Yeah, so acreage it's a minimum of 10 acres for agricultural.
I mean, I suppose we could get even more complicated. I don't know if we really want to do that, but, you know, the larger the lot under the 10 acres, you know, you could set parameters for the amount of the number of structures. The city could go as far as requiring what the structure must look like or set design standards. I mean, you know, is it okay that we have a tin box sitting out there, or do we want to require something a little bit more than that aesthetically? I guess I don't know if anybody would be open to some of that, but then again, you know, we're really setting the parameters of what the property owner must do with their property. But we could look at something like that as far as size, quantity, things of that nature in the ETZ, if that's something that the commission was open to considering, if we think that's necessary. Obviously, I think the goal here is to prevent an industrial-looking atmosphere on a residential area, and your neighbor has to look at it. So I think keeping that in mind, you know, what might be appropriate.
Even just painting them makes them a lot. I
Yeah.
mean, instead of an orange or green box sitting out there.
I mean, I think they come in, 20 and 40-foot lengths?
I think there's 16 too for some reason.
Or 16.
I'm surprised they don't fit in that 10 by 12. I mean, I understand that's stick-built structure at the end of the day, but that 10 by 12, anything over 10 by 12.
Your microphone is off as well.
For the complaints we've received already for, within city limits, our response has just been there's nothing in the code restricting it currently. I mean, that's correct?
Yeah, so since, as it's currently written, these are often able to be considered as accessory structures. So that's
Okay.
been the primary argument for any property owners is they could put them there because they're considered accessory structures.
Okay.
Now, this one here's got 10, 20, and 40 footers, so I'm sure there's
10.
something in between, I would guess.
Well, I think what I would recommend is that we take it back, consider some of the feedback that was provided, look at some additional language, and bring it back as a work session item for the next meeting. So that would be my recommendation.
I mean, in certain zoning codes, in commercial, I don't like them either. Like in CC or lower, I don't think they should be there either. Personally, that's my personal opinion on it. I think they're unsightly in the city limits, where you stack 4 or 5 cubes behind a strip mall and
Mhm.
use them for storage, but that's my personal opinion, so.
Would it be-
Especially when they've got the shipping container name on the side, or they're
Yeah.
green or yellow or orange, or.
We can definitely take it back and even have a discussion internally about whether or not code enforcement feels that they would be able to enforce that within the commercial zoning districts, what exactly we see as the benefits of.
Maybe in GI and
disenforcement.
industrial, it's not a big deal. I mean, or some of the higher, even light industrial maybe, but when.
Even in GC, I would struggle to see us adding any
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
prohibition
even
on
GC.
these.
I'm just talking like the strip malls, the light commercial, CC. I don't like them, but maybe I'm the only one, so.
Well, just looking at a general local area that provides these storage units, I mean, they can add bathrooms in them, they can make them mobile offices. So it's crazy what someone could put in their backyard.
Well-
And it does have the aesthetic where it could possibly conform.
When I was deployed, we lived in these. They put doors in them and put air conditioning units on them and that kind of, so, I mean, you can do a lot with them, but
And again, once they're modified, that's not what we're trying to prevent. I think it does offer a pretty good alternative to have a little bit of a more affordable building style. But when they're not modified, just being used as storage containers, that's where we run into the issue.
Would there be a way to roll this out for city and then have the discussion of doing ETZ as an amendment to it?
I would
Later date.
definitely suggest doing it all in
in
one
one.
amendment. Otherwise, we'll just be kind of back here doing the same
Sure.
song and dance. The other concern with preventing them from being utilized in community commercial is that we do currently allow those convenience storage uses in community commercial. So the look of that kind of use and the look of these structures often is kind of equivalent. So it can be a little bit tough to justify not allowing them in community commercial when we allow that use that takes up the entire property.
I mean, maybe in RR, if we allow them, it's one of a certain size, and it's gotta be painted to match the house, or something done to it where it doesn't say Mazic on the side, and it's bright green or whatever it is,
Yeah.
so.
We can definitely have a conversation with the building department on how that would look to enforce.
Okay. All right. The next item then, anything else on that shipping container? Bring that back next month. All right. See you soon. The last item on our work session then is rezone petition protest presentation.
Thank you, Commissioners. So this is a follow-up to the presentation given at the last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting regarding those rezoning protest petitions. So some of the questions to consider: what are the minimum requirements for noticing zoning map/text amendments and the minimum requirements for protest petitions as determined by North Dakota Century Code? And how are other communities handling these requirements? So our current amendment process, as we discussed last time, for protests: if a valid protest petition opposing an amendment is filed with city administrator or designee by eligible property owners, a 3/4 vote of those members elected to the Board of City Commissioners is required for approval. A valid protest petition must meet the following criteria: A, submission of the petition in the office of the building inspector within 14 days after the conclusion of the public hearing on the amendment by the planning commission. B, notarized signatures by at least one of the following. 1, the owner or owners of at least 20% of the property proposed for rezoning. 2, the owners of 20% of the total area, excepting public rights-of-way and public property, within the zoning jurisdiction of the city and within 100 feet of the proposed rezoning. So within the North Dakota Century Code, this is pretty well outlined as the governing body of a city which uses zoning regulations shall provide for the manner in which the regulations and restrictions must be established, enforced, or supplemented, and for the manner in which the boundaries of the district must be established and from time to time changed. A copy of each proposed regulation, restriction, or boundary must be filed with the city auditor. No regulation, restriction, or boundary may become effective until after a public hearing at which parties in interest and citizens shall have an opportunity to be heard. Notice of the hearing must be published once a week for 2 successive weeks before the time set for the public hearing in the official newspaper of the city. The notice must contain the following items. A, time and place of the hearing. B, description of any property involved in the zoning change by street address if streets have been platted or designated in the area affected. C, a description of the nature, scope, and purpose of the proposed regulation, restriction, or boundary. D, a statement of times at which it will be available to the public for inspection and copying at the office of the city auditor. 2, upon establishment of any regulation, restriction, or boundary hereunder, the governing body of a city shall file a certified copy thereof with the city auditor and shall cause notice of the same time to be published in the official newspaper of the city. The notice must describe nature, scope, and purpose of the regulation, restriction, or boundary and must state times at which it will be available to the public for inspection. 3, governing body of a city zoning commission and a board of adjustment shall state grounds upon which any request for zoning amendment or variance is approved or disapproved. Writings finding upon which the decision is based must be included in the records of the governing body. The main gist of this whole section is that requirement that once a week for 2 successive weeks before the public hearing, we need to have a notice in the official newspaper. This is the other section. Regulations, restrictions, and boundaries may be amended, supplemented, changed, modified, or repealed from time to time. If a protest against a change, supplement, modification, amendment, or repeal is signed by the owners of 20% or more, 1, of the area of the lots included in such proposed change, or 2, of the area adjacent extending 150 feet or 45.72 meters from the area to be changed, excluding the widths of the street. So this is the origin of that section in our code, which allows for that protest petition. It outlines that 20% requirement, and it outlines that it's either the lots being rezoned or any properties within 150 feet of the lots being rezoned. So that's where this actually comes from. This is a Century Code requirement. It cannot be removed. What are other communities doing? As you might think, a majority of them have the same protest process that we do, as it's pretty much copied from the North Dakota Century Code. Petition of, or protest of the zoning ordinance is filed and signed by owners of 20% or more of the property and within 150 feet. In Bismarck, Watford City has the same requirements. Williston has the same as well. The only difference is for Grand Forks. So they have an altered rezoning approval system, which instead of having any kind of protest petition, it by default requires that any rezoning request gets 75% of their city commission approval. So that way they skirt the requirements of the protest by just making that mandatory in all cases. So as mentioned, North Dakota Century Code outlines process for protest petition regarding zoning map amendments. City currently meets the minimum requirements for noticing and protest petitions for zoning map amendments as outlined by North Dakota Century Code. The notice by petition is the only addition that is not required by the North Dakota Century Code. An alternative is similar to Grand Forks. We could potentially require 3/4 vote for approval of all zoning map amendments, although this might delay future rezoning projects, so city staff would not support that change. What we are suggesting is alterations. For the required notices and petitions, as we mentioned in the previous meeting, we would be removing the end of item 1 where it says as determined by the city in order to clarify that these are the required notifications for every project. And then we would also be removing item C, that notification by petition, where the applicant shall acquire signatures of owners of all properties within 200 feet. That's prohibitively time-consuming. It can halt projects because you would need a signature from every property owner. We just don't see a justification for why that notification should be put in place, especially considering that notifications are being submitted in other ways, and that's not a requirement in city or in Century Code. And then our suggestion, the only change that we would make to the protest petition process is in item A, submission of the petition to the city administrator or designee instead of the office of building inspector. That most likely was left over from when the city was smaller and only had an office of the building inspector. This way, we can more easily delegate where that petition is going, so it doesn't have to go through the building inspector when usually the project goes through P&Z. With that, I'm open to any comments or questions that you guys may have regarding those changes and anything else that was found in the Century Code.
So if I remember right, we were really questioning the 75%. Is that what we were not liking? And that's pretty standard amongst everyone, so.
Yeah, so it's a requirement in Century Code. We're not able to
Yeah,
amend that.
yeah, I agree. And by the way, I just want to say, we appreciate, obviously, you guys have had to do a lot of research for all of these text amendments. We appreciate all the work you guys have done. I'm sure this is a lot of fun to read all these things, so.
It makes my week every single week. Love making these.
So, does that invalidate most petitions that come through because you have to have a notarized signature?
So historically, we have not received a lot of these petitions. The previous one, though, was notarized. So those signatures were notarized and it was valid.
Well, guess we can't change it.
I guess based on what we shared and what we've researched, any comments or suggestions based on what we were recommending as far as the text amendment that we'd prefer or recommend that we bring forward at the next meeting?
Yeah, I think these changes are fine. I mean, they fall within Century Code, so
All right.
talk to your legislature.
So when the city commission meets, though, if there's 4 out of the 5 are present, is that 75%?
So based on the way that we have it written, it would need 3/4 vote of the members elected. So it would need 4 out of 5, regardless of how many are present at the meeting.
And if there's an open seat, right?
Then I believe it would, unless I'm mistaken, push it to only needing 3 out of 4, but
I love the hypotheticals. It's like law school all over again. You know, when we've had that situation, usually if that's the case, you know, we look to see what the quorum is. But if it's written that way, we might be in a situation where we couldn't take a vote until we had a full commission. We have done that recently in the past where we have waited until we've had other issues come forward where we've had a full commission. I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that that never happens. But the way it's currently written, it would require a full commission to make that vote. So again, I don't envision that happening, but like I said, we'd cross that bridge when we come to it. But usually we have a full seated commission, so
Okay.
knock
thank
on
you.
wood. So.
It's just such an arbitrary number because most commissions in this state of North Dakota are 5 members, so the 75% is 3.5. It's just odd, so. Okay. Yeah, those changes, I think, we'll get those approved and
All right, then, yeah, expect a zoning text amendment on this at the next meeting.
sounds good. That's everything, unless there's, staff has anything else, or commissioners have anything else they would like to discuss?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn, do we have a
Second.
second? We are adjourned, thank you, everyone.
What's that?
Things happen, I mean. Yeah. Yeah, I think it was.